Hello and welcome to the Behind the Stripes football webcast. This is Columbia Tribune sports editor Joe Walljasper along with Tribune football beat writer Dave Matter. Dave, now in week 3 of preseason practice, the big news coming out of camp yesterday was Elvis Fisher, the longtime starting left tackle, blowing out his knee, going to be out for the year. Just maybe what impact is that going to have on Missouri's offensive line? Because they also have a few other injuries up front too.
Yeah, well, this was a really experienced offensive line, and now that changes a lot when they lose their left tackle, who started every game since that 2008 season. It's a big blow. I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat it. I mean, that's such a crucial position in any offense, but especially one where you're throwing the ball as much as Missouri does, especially one with a young quarterback back there. I mean, that's his blind side. On that left edge where you usually have the best defensive end lined up to try to rush the quarterback. So what Missouri did yesterday or on Monday was to put Justin Britt there. He was a guy that's played some center, he's played some guard, he's played some tackle in his short time at Missouri, and he's the new left tackle. Gary Pinkel said after Tuesday's practice that they planned on making Britt a tackle next year when they had to replace Fisher and Dan Hoke on the other side, so they're really just getting a year ahead of themselves. Good athlete. He's the same size as Fisher, not an overpowering guy. He's not huge. He's about 295 pounds. I think they have him at 6'5", but a really good athlete, and that's what you need more than anything out there. When you've got those wide splits and you're pass protecting most of the time. So they're just going to have to go with it and see how it works. But physically, I think he'll be fine. I think it's just a matter of being on the same page as the rest of the linemen. Not making mental mistakes, not getting his quarterback killed back there by missing a block or some of those things you see when you have young linemen that might get confused by blitzes or things like that. And
then also their starting center, Travis Ruth, has an Achilles problem. I don't know how long they think he's going to be out for that, or maybe assess what's that cause.
That's indefinite at this point. I would think he'd be out the rest of the week at least. He started his one game in his career, but he's a guy that they've projected to be their center for a while now. They moved Jason Palmgren over from left guard to center. He's been handling all the snaps the last couple of days, and they moved Jack Miners into the left guard spot. He's kind of a jack of all trades, no pun intended, but he can play just about every position at guard and tackle. A pretty good backup to have, big, strong, powerful guy. So they've got 2 new starters on the left side right now, and it just depends on when Ruth comes back and they can move things around back there. But I think Gary Pinkel's going to look at the positive of this and see they're developing some depth, they're getting these guys some exposure. But what was perceived as a real strength of this team is the experience on the offensive line obviously takes a hit now. And I guess the good news is it happened, with a couple weeks before the first game, so at least this group has some time to work together, and this didn't just happen in the middle of the season.
One of the other strengths is obviously the defensive line, which was already pretty well loaded, and then at long last, Sheldon Richardson arrived on a chariot with people waving grape leaves and feeding. Well, anyway, he did show up. Maybe not quite that way. Just your thoughts on, is he all that he was cracked up to be, if that is even possible, and what sort of impact he might make?
Well, I think it was hard for him to show up and be everything he was cracked up to be on the first day, because you got to kind of figure things out, and you got to get used to how team practices and things are different. I mean, this is the most structured program he's ever been a part of, obviously. But when you just watch him and what he can do physically, even though he probably hasn't even figured out yet what they really want him to do, he's pretty impressive. I mean, he's a combination of a big, strong, powerful guy inside and also super quick. I mean, he's listed at 310 pounds, and that's what he weighed in at, 310 pounds. Maybe lost a few pounds since then. But you look at the guy run around, I don't know where he hides it. I mean, he looks like a kind of an overgrown linebacker. I mean, the way he just runs, he's so nimble, quick on his feet. And just watching him in the one-on-one drills is really impressive. It's a little bit different game when you're actually playing from scrimmage, and they can cut block you, they can double team you. But you see glimpses of a guy that can be a special kind of player. Now he just has to keep earning some spots up the depth chart. I think as of Tuesday, he said he was the 6th defensive tackle. And they usually play, 4. They like to play 5. So he's still got some room to move up. But I think as long as he stays healthy, he'll be a factor on this line eventually.
I don't think it's a super complex position to learn either. I mean, I think it's something you just kind of get in there, and there's a few things you got to know. But basically, you're just trying to whip the guy in front of you. And I think he's a guy that I would assume would play at least half the snaps, probably the way they rotate defensively.
Yeah, and they're in good shape there. They've got Terrell Rosano and Dominique Hamilton, 2 guys that have played a lot for this team and in this league. So if you can get a rotation going there with those three and then add a few more, it's a pretty good situation to have.
I mean, last year they were winning games towards the end. They had guys like Brendan Donaldson pretty much, playing a lot of snaps a game. So I think, assuming they don't have a ton of injuries there, I think they're pretty well set all over the defense.
Yeah, absolutely, especially up front. And when you have guys like Braden Burnett, who I think could probably start for some teams in the Big 12, and he's third or fourth at defensive end. Coney Ely, Michael Sam, these are guys that are coming off the bench for this team.
Yeah, we haven't talked a whole lot about Michael Sam. He had a good year last year.
He really did, yeah. And he was so close to making a lot more plays. He was just a step behind on having a few more sacks. So, and he's right now with Brad Madison now. He's got a shoulder injury that they don't think is going to be really serious. But they've got Sam working with the first team opposite Jacquez Smith, who is one of the best defensive ends in the Big 12 as well.
All right. The backup quarterback competition was one that's basically a three-man race. Just how's that been shaking out?
Well, the way that the depth chart looks after the first scrimmage, Jimmy Costello moved up. He's the guy that was going to – he did leave the team after last season, even though he had a year of eligibility left. He was going to move on with his life. Tyler Gabbert quits the team in May. They bring Costello back as a guy who, nobody really figured that he was going to make a run at the starting job. He was just a good person to have on the team, in the locker room, a senior. They don't have many old guys at that position. They don't have any old guys. But right now, he looks like number two. He had a really good scrimmage. I think he completed 12 of 13 passes. Long term, he's not a guy you plan around. But he's kind of holding things down right now. Corbin Bergstresser, the true freshman, he's still in the hunt there for some playing time in the number two job. He threw, I think, 3 interceptions in the scrimmage. But he's still a guy that has, if you're just looking at pure throwing ability, he's the best of those backup candidates. I mean, he can really throw it. But, he's just still figuring things out. He's just a freshman. Ashton Glazer's still in there in the mix. So I think that's still, to be decided. And they've got 2 more scrimmages to kind of figure out what happens there with the backup job.
It's interesting because it seems like the guy who clearly is the biggest part of their future amongst that group would be Bergstresser. But you're not really in a situation like you were last year where you really wanted to get someone who is going to play next year some experience because they were a little concerned that Gabbert might leave. This year, obviously, that's not an issue.
Right.
So I think if you could get away with, if you feel like it's pretty close and can get away with redshirting Bergstresser, that would give you 2 years of eligibility between him and Franklin. I think that would probably be a better situation.
Yeah, and this is a freshman class where I don't see many players, if any, seeing the field this year. They just don't have the need, for one, because of their experience everywhere else.
It was a tiny recruiting class
and
not
class.
Not a really well-regarded one.
Nobody really jumping out, but he is a guy that I think they can maybe just prepare to play and then not play until they feel like they have to.
Mm-hmm. And then lastly, kind of a big picture item. From last we talked about the Longhorn Network, well, it all boiled over, and Texas A&M appears to be on the verge of leaving if all the details can be worked out. What do you think maybe the long-term, well, first of all, do you think they do leave? Do you think what the short-term impact on the Big 12 is? Does it collapse? Does the big doomsday scenario happen? Or do you think it kind of sticks together and limps forward and tries to add on and make a go of it?
I think more people, especially at Missouri, want the Big 12 to last. I think the doomsday scenario is fun to talk about, but I do think Missouri, Chancellor Brady Deaton and Athletic Director Mike Alden, I think they genuinely want the Big 12 to work. It's a matter of finding another school if and when Texas A&M leaves. But I really do think, and you've written about this a bunch this week, I think that is their true intention, that they really do. That's their top priority. Can it happen? I don't know. It depends, what the league can do as far as adding another member and what the other conferences want to do if they want to expand further than what they have already. So I think that the toothpaste is out of the tube as far as Texas A&M. I think they're just it comes down to some legal and legislative hurdles, but it doesn't seem like they could even come back at this point. I mean, I think the league would be more chaotic than it is without them if they would come back, just the tension there. So I don't know. It's a very strange situation because there's just so many, I think, baseless reports out there that seem to keep it just makes it even more unclear where leagues stand, where schools stand, and it's just a lot of muck to kind of get through.
I think Mike Alden and Brady Deaton are very sincere when they say they're not that interested in talking to the SEC or going to the SEC. What I'm not quite sure of is if that's really a show of loyalty to the Big 12 as much as we just don't want to go to the SEC. I mean, that's going to be a meat grinder conference, and that's,
Right.
I don't think we fit that well, et cetera, et cetera. So it would be interesting if you could hypothetically say if the Big 10 were expanding right now, would Missouri be interested? I tend to think they would. They say they're not, but so that's part of it. And so if you knew that answer, I think you maybe could have a little better idea of whether the Big 12 has any chance of surviving, into the future, any distance. Because it's in a weird way, Missouri has kind of become the linchpin to this. Obviously Texas and Oklahoma are the two biggest guys, and if they decide to go, then the league does go under. But both of them want to stay for good reason, because the Big 12 is working for them. So then the next most probably sought after school is Missouri, and as long as they're staying, I think the Big 12 probably will kind of limp forward and stay intact. I think the issue also is, who are they going to be able to go get if they do need to replace Texas A&M? Because they really got an image problem. I can't foresee them attracting anyone from another BCS league to the Big 12, because it's just viewed as so unstable. Not just viewed as unstable, it is unstable. So then you've got, you can shoot for the moon with Notre Dame, but I mean, that seems incredibly unlikely. And kind of the intriguing one to me, at least, is BYU, an independent that, would bring a national following and a real passionate group of fans. And if they were willing to do it, then I think maybe you can make a go of it. But it's if you end up with Houston or some of these other teams that have been mentioned that aren't too sexy, I just don't know how much longer it's going to last.
Right. And, if they can keep the TV deals intact, regardless who they add, well, then it looks like a win for the Big 12. But long term, are you really making the league better if you add Houston, if you add a Louisville maybe? Cincinnati's been thrown out there. Are you really improving the league, or are you just merely surviving and setting the stage for, things to unravel again down the road? I mean, what's most important? Is it securing those TV deals, or building something strong and stable for the future? And if the other conferences keep on adding and keep getting bigger, can anyone expect the Big 12 to expand beyond 10? I mean, who's going to join this league? I just don't know.
I mean, you could add for the sake of adding, but I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, well, join us again next week when we will begin to look forward to the season opener against Miami of Ohio.